as a storyteller, it's probably in my best interest sometimes to make videos and tell stories about my life, and also to share, because I like to share stories about my life, not in any way that's boastful or reminiscing, but simply to give people who watch my videos and who have read my books a deeper understanding of the life that I lived, because it has been quite magical. I've lived a pretty magical life, and that goes for both sides of the coin: magical in a dark sense and magical in a beautiful, euphoric and light sense. And often the experiences that I have had, looking back at them, it feels on some level like I've lived 30, 40 lifetimes in one, in my 50 years incarnate in my body. I'm going to write to you now a story about the Golden Bay, which is the top of the South Island. Actually, I'm going to give you a number of stories from the Golden Bay, anecdotes from the Golden Bay it's not the right word, but anecdotes from the Golden Bay of stories that tell you about my experience of being in this place. Now, the Golden Bay is the top of the South Island of Te Waipaunga in New Zealand, which is the South Island. It's a beautiful location, and it's renowned for two things, in my perception: hippies and redneck farmers. And no offense to people living down there who aren't either of those things, and no offense to people that down there who are farmers or hippies. I'm not labeling anyone, I'm just saying it's my experience of people that I've met down there over the years and generally fall into two categories, as a number of friends who live down there still tell me that's their experience of living in the Golden Bay: hippies and farmers, redneck farmers. But the Golden Bay is a very special place. I love it. I love that place. It's very isolated in the sense that the road that you have to go over to get there is one of the most epic roads in this country. There are a couple of roads like that wind up, traversing up this enormous crystal mountain and going down the other side. There are a couple of roads like that in this country. One in Fiordland, two in the Fiordland region, one in the Crown Range between Queenstown and I think it's Wanaka? No, Aotearoa maybe? Cadrona? And also one in Fiordland between Milford Sound and Te Anau. But the Golden Bay itself is a very special place. Very special place, energetically especially. And many years ago, when I first started to go down there and over there, I had a number of experiences meeting some very spiritually conscious people who were waking up and had some very interesting experiences in regards to entity possession and entity parasitical attachment to me personally. And I met an old friend of mine down there who I haven't seen since this experience in 1997, who was not in a good way, not very grounded, and I feel as though she had a Kundalini awakening at 21, 22. A woman called Valentina, I haven't seen for a long time. I loved dearly, a dear friend. So let me start with Valentina. My experience with her. When I met Annette, this woman that I was with for about 3 months, that was the catalyst for my remembering my recall of my lifetime on Atlantis as whāreus. We travelled together around the country, top of the South Island for a little bit, and then up to the North Island, and back eventually to Auckland, and flew out of Auckland. But before we left, we were working together for about a month in Motueka, picking apples together, and kiwi fruit together. And one weekend, her friends and I, we met picking apples, some friends of hers that she'd been working with, and decided to go to the Golden Bay for a weekend. And we all piled into one of these cats' vans, and we drove over the hill. And as we were going over the hill, I had this really strong psychic premonition that we were going to see my friend Valentina at the Wholemeal Cafe, which is a famous cafe in the Golden Bay. We got down there to the Wholemeal Cafe. I walked inside the cafe, and there was Valentina looking at the display food at the counter. And I was like, Valentina! Wow! I knew I was going to see you. She turned to me, and the look on her face was just like dumbfounded. She didn't know who I was. We'd hung out a lot over the last 3 summers. I was up in the Motueka region by 1997. And I remember looking at her, and she didn't even know who I was. And she kind of had this moment of recognition, and I had to give her a hug. And the moment I hugged her, I felt this etheric, black, sooty wave come around me and begin to squeeze me, like pull me into her. Like, what the fuck? I let go and I stood back and went, whoa, what's going on? To which she said to me, I am preparing for flight. And I went, okay. I walked outside into the garden bar where my girlfriend was and where my friends were. And one of my friends, Richard, this German cat who lived in a place called Bird's Clearing, said to me, Father, come over here. I walked over to him, he was reading a paper, and he said to me, stay away from her. Stay away from her. She was found in someone's house at 3 a.m. screaming, my baby, about a week ago. And that woman hit her over the head with a frying pan, called the police, and they put her in the cell for the night, and they let her go the next day because the woman didn't want to press charges. Now, I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea what was going on for her at the time. But he said to me, Richard said to me, listen, tonight we're having a party at my house up at Bird's Clearing. Bring your friends up. Come on up. Come and enjoy yourself. So, not to get into any incriminating anecdotes, but we went to the party and we got up there up to the house at Bird's Clearing. It's a beautiful location, incredible chalet, like European chalet style house. We got up to the house and there's banging psych trance down in the house, and where Richard was, and there was 2 houses, a lower house and an upper house. And the upper house were where me and my friends were, and a bunch of people I knew from Nelson were kind of hanging out there around a fire. Around an open fire, just hanging out in the house, just talking. And we all went down to the lower house, and while I was down in the lower house, people were all standing against one side of the wall. And Richard used to sell clothes from Bali. He'd go to India and Bali and buy clothes and bring them back and sell them. He had 2 racks of clothes in front of his window, with this huge pane window looking out over the Golden Bay up towards Farewell Spit. And everyone was standing back against one wall, all pointing towards where the clothes were, and you could hear this audible wailing over the psych trance music. Dum, 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 dum. And it's, over there, I was like, what is that? And someone pointed behind, said, go look over there under the blue light. Someone said, go look over there, pull those 2 racks of clothes apart and see who's there. And I was like, oh, alright. So I walked over there. I pulled the racks of clothes apart, and there was Valentina on her knees, facing towards everybody who would push these clothes, obviously would put her there or she'd gone there. Everyone was staring at her, and she was bawling her eyes out, screaming, my baby, and I had no idea what was going on, but I picked her up right away and took her outside. This was my friend. I took her outside and I called down my friends, come and give me a hand here and let's heal Valentina. So I called Val's friends who were there and some of my friends. We all stood around her and we all did our best to tone, to pray, to sing, tell her how much we loved her, but nothing got through to her. And what happened for me at the time is that I began to feel a descending slope, a slippery slope into depression, into anxiety, into feelings and thoughts that I hadn't thought in years, that all began to manifest in my mind. I began to feel terrible, began to feel low, depressed, anxious, afraid, fearful. All these thoughts began to spin around in my head. All these horrible memories began to churn around in my mind. And it was then that I began to realize that whatever it was that was preying on Valentina and causing her to feeding off her and creating a feedback loop from her, some of those beings, those parasitic or lower astral beings, had actually attached themselves to me and were feeding off me. I had no way, I didn't have the tools at all to be able to flush them away and get rid of them. I didn't have the tools, I didn't know how to do it. So what happened next was that Val got healed by my girlfriend at the time, Annette. Annette took her into the lounge and stunned everybody by healing her and putting Val to sleep. Annette was an amazing healer, and probably still is an amazing healer. Put Valentina to sleep, and I went for a walk up the hill around sunrise, and I missed the sunrise. I went onto this land. I didn't know whose land it was, but I thought it was a national park. I went onto this land, and when I was on the land there, feeling really sorry for myself, and these entities were truly feasting on me. I was in a really low place. On the land, this farmer came up on a quad bike with a son behind him and a shotgun over his lap. He said to me, "Get the fuck off my land right now, you fucking hippie." I was like, "This is National Park." He's like, "National Park is over there. You're on my fucking land. Get the fuck off my land." So I burst into tears. I crossed over into the National Park and back into Richard's place. Walked down the hill. And as I was walking towards where Annette was and my friends were, and they were all asleep by then, I heard a voice in my head clearly audiently say, "Get into the water at Waikoropupu Springs." Now, Waikoropupu Springs was once called the most clearest water in the world. It's a spring where the water that goes into the mountains, which is now the Kahurangi Range, the Kahurangi National Park, goes into the mountain range and filters down through the limestone underneath the earth and comes eventually bubbling up at this spring called Waikoropupu Springs in the Golden Bay Valley. And I remember going into the building going, "Come on guys, we've got to go to Waikoropupu Springs right now, we've got to go right now." And they're like, "What are you fucking talking about? We want to go to sleep." I said, "I'll drive, let's go. So we all piled into the van, and I drove down this winding, zigzag, four-wheel drive track in a two-wheel drive van. Drove down to the springs, parked up. I remember getting out of the van and sprinting towards the springs. Clothes flying everywhere as I ran along the trail. Naked past Japanese tourists, busloads of Japanese tourists. Running towards the springs, and I dove into the springs. And the moment I dove into the springs, boom, whatever it was that was attached to me was gone. And I remember coming out of the water, whoa, not because it was cold, but because I'd shed all these entities that had attached themselves to my lower chakra system. Because I wasn't embodied at this time. I wasn't embodying my entire body. I was still in my upper chakra system and not embodying my entire body. I got out of the water, dried myself off, and I didn't see Valentina again after that experience. Same place, Golden Bay, same summer, but before I met Annette, I met someone called Lauren, an American guy from California, called Lauren. He was a traveller, and Lauren and I became really close friends. We hang out together all the time. Travelled together around to a few festivals around the top of the South Island for a wee while. He was a character, man, true character. He just come from Antarctica actually when I met him. He's working down at McMurdo Base, I think it's McMurdo Base. Was it Scott Base? What's the American? It's McMurdo Base. And Antarctica is a chef down there. And we hang out quite a lot. And we were in the Golden Bay for a while, hanging out together, just cruising around, doing our thing. And we met a guy I used to live with in Dunedin called Brett McKenzie, who came up from Dunedin for the summer in the Nelson region. And Brett lost his way in a big way when I met him. He began to lose his way. And he was never in a good place when I met him in the first place, years and years before. But he was really losing his way in a big way at this time when we were hanging out with him. And one night we were down at Rangihatia Beach, which is on the top of the Golden Bay, facing towards the North Island. And he and I had an argument, and Brett really was not in a good place at all. And he became very catatonic after smoking a whole bunch of weed on this beach that night. And I remember sitting down with my friends Ratu and Lauren and another cat, I can't remember, I think his name was Simon, it's a long time ago, together just having a bit of a chat around the fire. And I mean, we were able to check on Brett. His girlfriend was sitting with us as well at the time, and she wasn't getting along with him at the time. And we were sitting there just talking, all of us around the fire, and Brett was sort of off to the side. I went over to check on him. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "Brett, are you okay?" He lifted up his head, and his eyes were completely black. He had no irises, just completely black. I kind of leaned back a bit and went, what the fuck? I slowly moved back away from him, went over to his girlfriend and said, hey, listen, I think you should go and talk with Brett. And she began to talk to him, and he was just catatonic. He wasn't there. He was no longer in his body anymore. Something else had taken over his body. The next morning, he was back to who he was before. This thing that was in his body that night was gone, and Brett was back. And I had talked to Ratu about this, and Ratu, this Maori guy, Ratu, which means rising sun or standing sun. Ra, sun, tu, stand. Or Erin, my friend Erin, the Maori cat, he told me a story which I relayed to some friends last night about the Golden Bay. He used to go hunting a lot up, which was then the Cobb Valley, up into the mountains, which is now, of course, the Kahurangi National Park. But he used to go hunting up there quite a lot, and with a knife, and stalk deer and kill deer up there, and pigs, and live in the bush for weeks at a time. He told me a story. He was stalking a deer. He'd been stalking a deer for a couple of days, and he sort of tracked it down and was about to sneak up on it. I don't know how he's going to do this, but he was obviously downwind of it. You sneak up behind it and then obviously eat it. And something spooked it. It took off, and he's like, oh fuck! It was on the other side of the valley. It wasn't too far away, but far enough for him to be able to stalk up behind it and then do his thing. But it ran off, got spooked, and it took off. And he's like, ah, shit. He sat down on the ground. And he said there was a rock ledge and a cliff face where the animal had been spooked by. The animal was here, the rock ledge was here, and the wall was there. He said this is where he got spooked. And the animal got spooked, I should say. And the animal taken off from there, and he said the wall, this is around twilight, so it was getting around dark. He said the wall, the solid rock face began to shimmer like it was like water, like a waterfall. And as it began to shimmer, three beings walked through the shimmering wall. He said that he estimated them between 7 to 9 feet tall. Reptilian beings, walked through the shimmering wall, walked onto the ledge and looked around. He said they all had crowns of horns. They had brown chest plates with lime green arms and bodies, torsos. They had a brown chest plate of brown scales, and brown on the shoulders, a little bit on the shoulders of brown too, brown shoulders, brown chest plates, looked around and walked back into the wall again, and the wall became solid, he thought. No more shimmering. And he went over there, he said, bravely went over there, and he was like, it's a rock wall, it's a rock wall. And when I asked him about this, I said, what do you think that was? And he said that he told me, this is back in 1996, he told me that there was a nest of vipers, a nest of these beings living beneath the mountain range, which is now the Kahurangi National Park. There's a nest of these creatures living in there. He said the lava tubes that go through this whole region, because this area was once upon a time volcanic, that go through the limestone lava tubes and tunnels that go through this entire network, through this entire mountain range. He said that there's a nest of them living in there, in this mountain range, and they live under the valley as well, he said, of the Golden Bay Valley, which at the time to me was incredibly far-fetched. Even for me, I was going through my conscious awakening experience, but I totally believed him. I believed him because I looked in his eyes and I saw that he was serious. He really saw this. And it would be not long after that I'd come across Barbara Marciniak's book, Bringers of the Dawn, while getting a reading from my friend Kariana Grace in Nelson. And she would direct me to go and get a book from her library, and that was when I couldn't find a book, left her room, and as I left the room, some spirit pulled one of the books out from the middle of the second shelf, pulled a book out, threw it on the floor, and the book was Barbara Marciniak's Bringers of the Dawn, where she relayed that our Kazis, our peers, the Lizzies, the Reptilians, were the beings that had genetically engineered some human forms on this planet at some point in prehistory. And I was like, oh my god, there's an alignment here. There's an alignment here. And it makes sense to me as well, because many years later, Dr. Imaro Imoto, who I saw speak here in the Theosophical Society here in Wellington before he passed, did a test of the water. Took one of the crystals from Waikaropupu Springs and a crystal from our spring here in Wellington at Batoni. And the Batoni spring crystal was beautiful. Beautiful. But the crystal from Waikaropupu Springs was distorted. A mess. And to me it makes sense, because I feel as though that where that nest is, that water that flows through underneath that mountain range, it comes underneath the mountain range, is imbued with the energy of these beings. And it flows through the valley, and it magnetizes all that energy in that valley, in that bay, pulls it all into that river, into that underground source, and it bubbles up through Waikaropupu Springs, and it goes downriver to the ocean, where it cleans back to source energy in that metaphorical sense. But the Golden Bay is a very special place. It walks that fine line in my perception between the light and the dark. And even though I've had many dark experiences down in that part of the country, part of the world, in fact, I've had many wonderful light experiences as well, humorous, joyful experiences. And that is one of the beautiful things about the Golden Bay for me, is that it has that clear definition of light and dark. There's no grey areas there for me, in my experience. It's always light, incredibly light, or very dark. And thankfully, my last experiences I've had in that particular part of the country have all been beautiful and light. I guess I feel, more feel than guess, that that's because my resonance is very different to the one that I had way back then. Gee, it was 1996, 97. Whew. Thanks for watching, I truly appreciate it. Aotearoa. Thanks for watching.